Marco Rubio. The name echoed through the marbled halls of Washington, synonymous with power, ambition, and an untouchable aura. He thought he was beyond reach, a master of the political game. But he was wrong. Because a single, quiet whisper, unheard by most, reached the ears of one woman. A woman who would not be silenced. This is the story of how Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, with relentless courage, exposed secrets so dark, so deeply buried, they didn't just ripple through Washington. They shattered it. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about power. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper. A mundane Tuesday in the Rayburn cafeteria, the clatter of lunch trays and the low hum of Capitol Hill chatter. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat, eyes on a binder, a cup of tea in hand. She wasn't looking up, but her senses were razor-sharp. Then, from a nearby table, a sentence, barely audible, drifted across the room. "He's got money in it. That's why they got the contracts." Jasmine's hand paused mid-sip. That sentence. It was the kind of thing that floated around Capitol Hill more often than people cared to admit. Half-truths, gossip, bitter aides blowing steam. But something about this voice, it wasn't bitter. It was nervous. She took another slow sip, her gaze unblinking on the page, but her mind was already racing. Later that afternoon, walking back to her office in the Longworth building, she couldn't let it go. Senator Marco Rubio's name had been coming up a lot lately in closed committee conversations. He'd been pushing defense proposals hard. Too hard, some said. Bills that seemed to benefit the same two companies over and over again. A lot of nods, a lot of signatures, but not a lot of answers. Back in her office, Jasmine dropped her bag on her desk. Her chief of staff, Von Tiller, looked up from his laptop. "Von," she began, her voice low. "You hear anything about Rubio and defense contracts, specifically two Florida-based firms?" Von's eyes flicked up. "I heard that same thing last week," he confirmed. "Something about him leaning on the Federal Acquisition Service. It's vague, though. Everyone's scared to say too much." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "Scared of what?" she pressed. "Losing their job? Or worse, people protect their careers out here like it's their firstborn." Jasmine wasn't easily rattled. She had been underestimated too many times before. Being a black woman with a courtroom background and a steel-trap memory made her a problem for people who relied on silence. She knew deep down that something was off, and she was determined to find out what. The feeling escalated. By Thursday, she had 3 separate mentions from different staffers about Rubio's pipeline, a sinister nickname for the recurring contracts quietly filtering through 2 Florida-based subcontractors with shaky public records and strange offshore holdings. Every time Jasmine asked for specifics, the answer was the same. Ask the wrong question and you'll get iced out. But Jasmine knew how to ask the right question in the wrong room and make people talk. On Friday, she walked into a closed committee review session on military procurement. The room was stuffy, filled with the hushed whispers of aides and the quiet rustle of papers. She kept her comments neutral, asking sharp questions about pricing structures. Her eyes, however, were constantly scanning, watching carefully. When Rubio's name came up, 3 people wouldn't meet her eyes. One staffer in a blue checkered tie got up and left mid-session, almost tripping over his own feet. Back in her office that night, Jasmine stared at her whiteboard. Names, arrows, dates, no proof yet. Just a feeling, but her gut hadn't failed her yet. She was packing up for the night when her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She let it ring. A minute later, a text popped up. It simply read, "You're asking about the wrong people, but you're right, be careful." Jasmine stared at the screen. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She showed it to Von, who raised his eyebrows but said nothing. The next morning, another message came through. "Meet me near the bottom escalator in Union Station. I'll be wearing a navy windbreaker. Don't bring anyone." She didn't answer right away, didn't want to look eager. but her mind was racing. If this was real, if someone on the inside was ready to talk, then the quiet rumors could be something much bigger. She walked over to the window, looking out at the Capitol. Lights flickered against the fog. People moved like normal. Tourists, Hill staff, journalists chasing recycled headlines. But Jasmine felt it in her bones. Something was off. Something real was buried beneath those whispers. And whoever had sent that message, they were scared. And that meant everything. Jasmine Crockett was about to step into the dark. Her journey into the heart of the scandal was about to truly begin. And what she found would leave her and Washington forever changed. The anonymous message burned a hole in Jasmine's pocket. Meet me near the bottom escalator in Union Station, Navy windbreaker. Don't bring anyone. Every instinct screamed caution, but another, deeper instinct, the one that drove her to expose injustice, screamed louder. This wasn't just a tip. This was a direct invitation to the heart of the darkness. Jasmine knew this was the moment of truth. Union Station was alive, a bustling symphony of hurried footsteps, distant announcements, and the low murmur of conversations. But for Jasmine, the world had narrowed to one spot, the bottom escalator near the food court. She stood to the side of the Dunkin' counter, pretending to check train times on her phone, her eyes scanning. Then she saw him. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, Navy windbreaker, just like the message said. Hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting nervously. When he spotted her, he hesitated just for a second. Then he walked toward the stairwell next to the bookstore. Jasmine followed. They didn't speak until they were out of the main flow of traffic in the hushed, forgotten space of the stairwell. He stopped, looked over his shoulder, then faced her. He didn't introduce himself. "You don't know me," he began, his voice low, shaky. "And I'm not doing this again. I just need this off me." He handed her a thick manila envelope, fat and sealed. Jasmine didn't reach for it yet. "You worked for Rubio?" she asked, her voice steady. He nodded once. 5 years, legislative operations, then scheduling. "Why are you doing this now?" The man rubbed the back of his neck. "Because he's not who he says he is, and because someone needs to do something before this gets worse. I thought about going to a reporter, but that's suicide. They'll dig me up in a week. You ask the kind of questions that get things moving." Jasmine finally took the envelope. It felt heavy in her hands, not just the paper, but the immense weight of what it might mean. "What's in here?" she pressed. "Money trails, email records, pressure points, some internal contractor memos. It's enough to show how deep he's tied in," he explained, then paused. "I just ask, protect my identity." "Your name won't leave my lips unless you say so," Jasmine promised. He gave a weak smile, then glanced at his watch. "Be careful. They don't come at you directly. They just ruin your life, one piece at a time." And just like that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jasmine with a chilling warning and an envelope full of secrets. She knew then that she had crossed a line, one from which there was no turning back. The envelope in her hands held the truth she'd been searching for. But as Jasmine and her chief of staff began to unravel its contents, they realized this wasn't just about a few rigged contracts. This was a sprawling, insidious network, a revelation that transformed a local problem into a national crisis. They were about to uncover a powder keg ready to explode and shake Washington to its core. Back at her apartment, the city lights a distant glow against the night sky. Jasmine locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat at her dining table. The manila envelope rested in front of her, an ominous presence. She opened it slowly, her breath catching. Inside, printed emails, screenshots, a USB drive, photocopies of bank transactions between a pack Rubio's team had quietly funneled money through, and a shell company registered in Delaware. She'd seen this game before, layers built to hide just enough, but not everything. But it wasn't just financials. There were internal memos from contractors discussing Rubio's guy at the agency and instructions to prioritize certain proposals even when they didn't meet baseline security requirements. And then came the shocker. A transcript of a phone call, no names, just labels, SCN and agent. A man's voice, cold and demanding. "You know what needs to happen. They're the best choice. Make it happen." And the agent's shaky reply, "They're not even on the shortlist." "Don't make this difficult," the voice had bitten back. "You want my support on relocation, then do your job." Jasmine stared at the page, reading it twice, then again. It was vague enough to create doubt, but combined with the rest, it painted a clear picture of manipulation. She picked up her phone and called Von. "Get to my place now. Bring the portable scanner." 10 minutes later, Von arrived, still tying his hoodie string, holding a takeout container in one hand. "Jesus, Jazz, what is it?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. She slid the envelope toward him. "Read." He did, slowly, quietly. His food went cold. "You know what this is?" he finally whispered. Jasmine nodded. "A powder keg. Can you verify any of it?" "I will," he promised, his eyes now wide awake. They stayed up most of the night, cross-referencing public records, FEC filings, LinkedIn job histories, and archive committee reports. Some of the connections were buried deep, but they were there. By 4 a.m., Von leaned back and exhaled hard. "This isn't just bad optics, this is criminal." Jasmine didn't respond. She was staring at the list of names. Some were high-level aides, others were part of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, and one was a sitting member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. But the worst part wasn't what she had read. It was what she hadn't read yet. On that USB drive. They worked in shifts, eyes dry, fingers stiff from scrolling and typing. The USB drive held folders, neatly labeled ones containing months of encrypted message logs, meeting itineraries, and digital bank statements linked to off-the-books consulting bonuses. It wasn't just Rubio anymore. There were at least 4 government officials indirectly connected to companies that Rubio had championed during budget sessions. Some names weren't surprising. Others sent a chill down her spine. People she'd passed in the hallways, smiled at in briefings, even exchanged holiday cards with. And then there was CM, a name that kept popping up in internal chat logs between execs at Havenwell Dynamics, a mid-sized defense firm in Tampa. Always vague, always careful. CM says push the delivery through before oversight asks questions. CM wants a face-to-face with R before the next committee meeting. At 6 a.m., Von finally leaned back and let out a low whistle. "This is national-level dirty, and you're going to be walking straight into it?" Jasmine nodded slowly, scrolling through one particularly damning email chain. "They built this like a maze, intentional misdirection, fake LCs, donations routed through education grants. It's smart, but not airtight." She paused at an email from a PAC director to a Rubio staffer. Subject line, "Winter Push." Inside, a short but pointed sentence. "Make sure the friendly faces at the agency clear the board before January. HWD can't lose that contract, not after all the grease." Von looked over her shoulder. "That's your smoking gun, and we're not even halfway through this mess." Before she could reply, her phone rang. Unlisted number again. She answered, ready this time. It was Elias. "You got it," he said, his voice the same shaky whisper from Union Station. "Good, but they're watching now. You're on a list. You need to be smart." "What do you want from me?" Jasmine asked, her voice firm. "Just truth." "I gave you more than I ever planned to. But once it's out, you're on your own." He hesitated. "You should be." The line went dead. Jasmine knew then that the truth she held wasn't just a secret. It was a weapon. And those who stood to lose were already coming for her. The stakes had just escalated. Jasmine Crockett now held evidence of a vast conspiracy. But simply having the truth wasn't enough. To make it count, she needed allies. She needed a strategy. And she was about to make a powerful, calculated move that would ignite the fuse on this powder keg, sending tremors through the very heart of Washington. Narrator. Jasmine Crockett now held a dangerous truth, a powder keg of corruption that could shatter careers. But simply possessing it wasn't enough. To unleash its full power, to ensure it resonated through the insulated walls of Washington, she needed allies. She needed a strategy, a firewall against the inevitable retaliation, and she knew just the man who could help her build it. Sound of a discreet, almost muffled library atmosphere, distant whispers, rustling paper, soft footsteps. Narrator. Jasmine's first instinct, the one honed in courtrooms and on campaign trails, was to go public, leak it to a trusted outlet, force the conversation, burn it all down. But this was different. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a deeply rooted infection. If she rushed it, they'd spin it as rumor, as partisan attack. The only way this stuck, the only way it ripped through the carefully constructed facade of power, was through the right channels, the right timing, and airtight facts. So she decided to loop in someone who owed her a favor, but more importantly, someone whose integrity was beyond question. She arranged a meeting with Representative Lowell Ingram, a Colorado Springs Republican known for his unflinching honesty and zero tolerance for backroom deals. They'd clashed on policy before, yes, but they respected each other's methods. Their rendezvous point, a private lounge at the Library of Congress. Quiet, no cameras, off the radar. Jasmine laid it out for him, stage by meticulous stage. First, the documents, then the emails, then the chilling audio transcript from the whistleblower. Ingram barely blinked. "This is real?" he asked, his voice low. "As real as it gets," Jasmine confirmed, her gaze steady. "And I need bipartisan support if I'm going to bring this forward without getting steamrolled." Ingram scratched his chin, then looked her squarely in the eye. "You're risking your whole career," he warned. She didn't flinch. "And what's it worth if I sit on this?" He nodded once, a slow, deliberate motion. "You'll have my voice, and I'll bring 2 others who won't fold under pressure." Back in her office, Jasmine and Vaughn began the meticulous process of scanning every file, every page, preparing encrypted backups stored on separate drives. They knew they were being watched now. A black SUV had circled the block twice. A strange call had come to the front desk asking if a Raphael's Crockett was traveling this weekend. They didn't panic, but they adjusted. Every copy was printed and hidden in different places. One went in a fireproof box in Vaughn's cousin's garage. Another went with a trusted friend from law school. A third was mailed, sealed, certified, and lawyer-stamped to a private investigative firm with instructions to open only if Jasmine failed to make contact within 2 weeks. She wasn't naive. She knew how quickly people in D.C. could vanish, reputational or literally. And yet, through all the tension, one thing stayed crystal clear. This wasn't about a political win. It was about exposing rot. But the real test wasn't collecting the truth. It was deciding when to say it out loud and facing the fire that would inevitably follow. Sound of a sharp, unsettling thump, like something heavy hitting a table, then a high, irritating whine, like feedback building. Narrator. The trap was set, the fuse lit, but Jasmine knew that in Washington every action had a brutal, swift reaction. As the first whispers of her investigation reached Marco Rubio's inner circle, the counterattack began, not just in the shadows but openly, aggressively. They were coming for her. And this time, they weren't just trying to silence her, they were trying to destroy her. Sound of a cacophony of distorted news snippets, angry voices, and a pulsing electronic beat gradually fading to a low, ominous hum. Narrator. The next Monday broke grey and humid, but inside the Capitol, the air felt sharper than usual. Jasmine slipped through a side entrance before sunrise, carrying a leather folio packed with fresh printouts. Vaughn tailed her, earbuds in, whispering a checklist of tasks: verify timestamps, cross-match wire transfers, prep encrypted thumb drive for secure drop. In a windowless conference room, Representative Lowell Ingram arrived with 2 colleagues he trusted, Beth Morales, a former Marine from Arizona, and Colin Rayner, a no-nonsense veteran from Ohio. Both despised backroom deals that put soldiers at risk. Jasmine opened with no ceremony. Rubio steered contracts worth $246 million to Havenwell Dynamics, she stated, tapping a color-coded chart Vaughn had prepared through the night. He gained personally through Shell dividends traced to Shoreline Consulting in Delaware. The company is a ghost, but Rubio's sister-in-law sits on its board. Beth Morales set her coffee down so hard the lid popped. That's a crime scene, not a policy debate. Rayner leaned forward. Proof stands, but process matters. Ethics will stall. Leadership will stall. We need public heat and procedural leverage at the same time. Agreed, Ingram affirmed. We file an ethics complaint today, then request a joint oversight hearing. Meanwhile, we leak enough to force the press to chase. Jasmine shook her head. If the story drips, Rubio's team will build counter-narratives. We drop everything in one controlled burst. Documents, timelines, the staffer's testimony. Leave no room for spin. The room fell quiet until Vaughn spoke. Then we pick a date and lock the doors behind us. Ingram gave a slow tilt of his head. I'll line up signatures across party lines, but you'll feel pressure. Phone calls after midnight, donors threatening primaries, committee chairs pulling your bills. Be ready. I didn't run for Congress to count favors, Jasmine stated, her voice unwavering. Outside, the first wave of pushback rolled in fast. A columnist at the Washington Review ran an op-ed hinting Crockett was weaponizing gossip for personal gain. Social media bots echoed the line within hours. A Florida radio host claimed she held a vendetta because Rubio once blocked her amendment on environmental funding. Jasmine's team documented every smear and traced several to a media firm, Vantage Vision, that had received payments from a Rubio-aligned PAC 2 weeks earlier. The dots kept linking themselves. That afternoon, Rubio's chief of staff, Patrick Moreno, a slick, menacing figure, cornered Vaughn near the Cannon Tunnel. Your boss is walking into traffic, Moreno murmured, barely moving his lips. Tell her she still has time to change lanes. Vaughn stepped aside, meeting Moreno's gaze. We're not the ones playing chicken. That night, Jasmine's apartment lights flickered 3 times, then went dark. A technician from the power company showed up unannounced, citing a routine grid check. Vaughn called the utility supervisor. No such work order existed. They switched to battery lanterns, copied files again, and kept going. On Wednesday, the Office of Inspector General acknowledged receipt of Jasmine's preliminary report. An hour later, a senior advisor to the Senate Armed Services Committee called Jasmine's cell. Some of your numbers don't add up. Maybe hold your findings until we verify. Jasmine recognized the tone. Polite stalling meant to buy Rubio precious days, she answered plainly. Verification is why I'm calling the hearing. Every door she opened revealed 2 more, but she refused to lose the thread. Vaughn scheduled meetings with forensic accountants. Morales arranged a quiet sit-down with the ranking member of House Oversight, who agreed to fast-track witness protection for the whistleblower. Yet threats kept shifting shape. A former donor pulled funding from Jasmine's district STEM program. Local radio in Dallas hinted at an FEC investigation into her own campaign. An accusation as thin as paper, but enough to seed doubt back home. She recorded a short video message explaining the smear, posted it, and went back to work. In Ingram's office that Thursday evening, he called, his voice grim. I have the votes to demand an emergency hearing, but Rubio's allies filed a motion to delay on procedural grounds. We're down to the wire. Jasmine rubbed her temples. File a counter-motion citing imminent risk to national security procurement. Use the contractor emails that mention bypassing cybersecurity checks. Good angle. You ready for cameras? Ingram asked. She exhaled. Born ready. As midnight crept up, Vaughn handed her a final packet. Testimony outline, source index, chain of custody log. Jasmine flipped through, then closed it. But the moment she stepped into the closed ethics panel the next morning, she would learn the real fight hadn't even started. The stage was set, the evidence prepared, and now Jasmine Crockett was ready to face the ethics panel, to unleash the truth that would rip through the heart of Washington's elite. Get ready, because the revelations that follow will leave you stunned.